And after that visit to Jerusalem with James yesterday, we go back now to Seneca on the island of Corsica. Lucius Annaeus Seneca. Wild and barbarous Corsica, imprisoning me completely by its cliffs, wastes, and desolations. The fall is fruitless, the winter gray, the spring a flood that drowns all the tender shoots. I've tried to write. I've tried to maintain a personal discipline, to read, to think, to observe, to write. But I've only driven myself to despair. My brains are rusted in disuse. How can I fashion one graceful sentence when the only language I hear is so coarse it wounds the ear of the savage who speaks it? How do I do? You want a description. Foodless, drinkless, lifeless, and not so much as a spark to light my funeral fire. 2 words alone can define my life in me: an exile in an exile. I hate this island. I hate this shrubby, burning, dirtless rock. The summer comes beastly early, and then what? Why, then the beast grows mad and rabid when the dog star shows his tooth. Gods, I am banished to a tomb, and the only mercy I beg is that the earth lie lightly on the ashes of the living dead. And that's all we're going to hear from Seneca right now. He doesn't sound very happy to me, even for somebody who was well known as a Stoic philosopher, one who was supposed to be able to bear all things. We're coming up on another section of the book now. Part 2, Antioch. And in it, we'll hear from somebody else, a man named Barnabas. Barnabas means, the name itself means the son of encouragement. And if you've never read Paul's letters or read the book of Acts, you'll find Barnabas in there often as one of Paul's traveling companions. And Paul often says that Barnabas was really good at giving him the encouragement, that he deserved his name. And I'm getting ahead of myself. If I comment too much, it'll spoil some of the surprise. Let me go on. Barnabas. Saul said, "In Damascus once I ate a thrush served on a nest of asparagus. It's a nibble dish. You eat the meat in slivers." "Garum," I said. "What?" he said. And I said, "Try garum. The Gentiles love garum in their cooking." "What?" he said. "What is it?" Do you see how much we have to look forward to? Actually, I'm the one who loves to eat. I have absolutely delighted in our freedoms. For Saul, food's a necessity that he often forgets, or else he uses it for formal declarations. "Garum," I said, "it's a fish sauce. You make it by steeping the guts of a mackerel in salt, or a tunny. They make it and ship it in huge clay jars. The best stuff comes from Cadiz." Saul said, "Down in Daphne once I ate a dormouse, little carcass on a little spit." I burst into laughter. In my mind's eye, I saw a big-headed, grimacing Saul tweaking mouse bones in his fingers. "Another nibble dish," I roared. Saul smiled, a wintry smile. We were sitting in a corner of Simeon's house, passing the time while people gathered for the weekly meal and worship. Simeon's servants had been preparing dishes all day long. Guests came bearing food of their own. It had triggered our topic, Saul's and mine. Neither one of us cooked. At the top of my lungs, I quoted Leviticus. "And these are unclean to you among the swarming things that swarm upon the earth, the weasel, the mouse, the dormouse, the mouse, the great lizard, the gecko, the land crocodile, and the mouse, the bright-eyed, busy dormouse." Half my laughter was knowing that Saul had a purpose in dining on the tiny rodent. I thought I'd drive that purpose to its extremes. "Here," I said, poking him in the ribs, "let me give you a recipe with more substance. It's called golden piglet. First, you get a sweet young pig through its mouth, first you gut a sweet young pig through its mouth like a goatskin bottle. Then you cram it with chickens and sausages and stone dates and smoked onions and snails and herbs. Oh, and thrushes too, my friend. Sew it up, roast it. When it's done to a turn, make a thin cut in the piglet's back and saturate the flesh with a sauce of rue, sweet wine, honey, oil, and garum. What do you think of that?" Saul said, "Give me porridge." The man can make a smile as thin as his leg bone. Wait, I cried, clapping my hands. "What about a sow's udder shaped to look like a fish? Is it a pig if it doesn't look like a pig?" About 5 years ago, shortly after I invited Saul to Antioch, we were crossing Herod Street when suddenly he turned aside to one of those cook shops that sells roasted meat by the slice. We had been discussing freedoms. I was telling him of the 2 times in my life when I'd felt such a glad rush of freedom that I felt I would explode. The first was when I sold my land and all my possessions and laid the proceeds at the feet of the apostles. I panted as I did that, experiencing a physical lightness, as if I could float like thistledown. My second discovery of freedom came more gradually. Here in Antioch, where the apostles had sent me to exhort the Antiochian believers in faithfulness. The great majority of believers were Gentiles. Already when I came, distinctions were disappearing. No longer were there God-fearers and proselytes among the Gentiles, no longer non-Jew and Jew, higher and lower, freeman and slave. Everyone who followed Christ as Lord was the same as everyone else, equal, a family. Even the Romans noticed our amazing unity. They classed us and named us Christians. Pretty soon, all the laws that had separated Jews from Gentiles also became as nothing to me. And that was my second experience of the lightness of freedom. I told Saul that it caused in me such a giddiness, such a physical, tickling joy, that laughter was always bubbling just below my throat. Always is what I was saying to Saul, when suddenly he turned aside at a cook shop, raised one long finger, and pointed at a piglet revolving on a spit, its fat flaring in the coals below. "One small portion, please," he said. A woman with huge arms cut him the smallest of portions and laid it on a green leaf and accepted his penny for her food. I fell silent. I had never seen this before. And though I delighted in our new freedom, what Saul was doing seemed as risky as stepping off a cliff. He pinched the pork in its folded leaf, and with 2 delicate fingers pulled off a greasy piece. He carried the meat to his mouth, crossing his eyes as it came. He put out his tongue and touched the bit of pig to the tip of it where it stuck. Then, scarcely breathing, Saul drew the meat into his mouth and chewed and chewed and swallowed it. He blinked rapidly, checking, it seemed, his vitals inside. Then he grinned and plucked at my sleeve and began to laugh, a gasping sort of laughter, like a man who jumped but did not drown. The little Pharisee had eaten pork. He had climbed the mount to Moses and said, "No more, we don't need Torah anymore." And then he descended to us and began to use food as a formal declaration and the evidence of a new life. Here in Antioch, when Saul ate among Gentiles, he ate like a Gentile. And to all the believers he announced, "For freedom, Christ has set us free." We're in the middle of this chapter, but I'm going to stop there anyway. And we'll pick it up there tomorrow.